Hello and welcome back to another exciting installment in the continuing story of the MoneyPigs podcast. I'm your host, Best Dibs NA, and as usual, we've got John and Twerp on the line. How's it going, guys?
It's doing great, man. How are you?
It's doing great. That is what's doing great. John is it, and it is doing great. How are you doing, Randy?
I'm doing quite well today.
So well. So well. So moving right into our podcast, we've got new new patch notes.
I'm still recovering from doing.
Moving right into it, we're going to take a look at our patch notes that we got last patch. And we didn't see anything change to the shapers, really, other than some small readability and a slight attack change to Varian, but yeah, nothing significant. So I guess our first significant thing on the patch notes is the new spell Exceed, which gives you additional power as well as percentage of your power for 5 seconds on a 90-second cooldown. What are you thinking about this, John?
So I tried it out in a couple of the games, playing Amaranth, of course, and kind of early mid game it's kind of like meh. It did a decent amount, but come late game when I was sitting there on a 6-item build with about 400 power, popping that like on top of the massive ratios that this game seems to sport on a lot of their mages, like the damage is just insane.
I wasn't that really into Exceed. I just really couldn't find a good time in the game when I would want to take it. I just feel there's so many other spells that are of use early game. Like, I'm not going to take Exceed over Blink at level 1 or something, especially if I'm on like a really squishy mage with no escape. Like, I don't know, maybe it's something I'd get at level 20, but for the most part, I'm letting Exceed stay unused.
Right, yeah, it was definitely not something I was picking up early. I tend to go with more defensive talents like the Deflect or Blink. But yeah, I was definitely taking it as the level 20 talent. And with Amaranth, with her 1.4 power ratio on her ultimate, grabbing another 30% of your power up in there, multiplying it by another 1.4, it's starting to increase your damage, your ultimate combo. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but it certainly felt big.
Just overall, at endgame, it's pretty much just a 25% power boost, whatever you're doing. So if your spell's, doing, let's say it does 400 damage, it's going to be doing an additional 100, so you're getting, 500 damage as opposed to 400, which is pretty significant. Early game, it is certainly an interesting spell. I think it does have use early on range shapers, because most of those people have 1-to-1 power gains on their attack damage, so the fact that for 5 seconds you can be getting an additional 30 flat damage, that's really interesting to be able to grab that. And if you half health somebody, maybe you're saying, oh, I'm going to pop Exceed now and get my last shot in, and that's going to last hit them. As well, though, you're right, there are spells which are definitely safer to take early, like Wither, which can be used offensively and defensively, or Bastion even as just a flat shield and more resist, or Blink is always great in terms of its versatility, but it's certainly an interesting addition.
Yeah, one of the nice things about it is it's one of those really low cooldown spells. It's got a 90-second cooldown, so that number is going to line up pretty close with your ultimate, so pretty much if you're playing a burst caster like Amaranth, you can pop it every 90 seconds to get some pretty crazy damage. Whereas with Blink, you've got that 300-second, 5-minute cooldown. Like, you can do those really cool like Blink ulti combos, but you're only going to get that every 5 minutes instead of 3 or 4 times every 5 minutes.
Right. I definitely think it's going to take a little more time for Exceed to settle and see how people are using it, but that 25% power bonus is certainly something to reckon with late game, and the flat 30 power, I think, helps out early game, so let's just see how it settles over time. So in terms of new features that were added last patch, we saw a number of additions being added to the key bindings with new buttons, and item shops are working more properly with recommended items. But our biggest features that were added were Surrender and Death Recap. So I guess let's start it off with Surrender. So that's working where you can surrender past the 20-minute mark when somebody's been disconnected for 5 minutes or more in total, or when there's a 20 kill lead or a 15,000 Vim lead. It's interesting that you've got these other ways that surrender can be procced. I certainly had games where a 15,000 Vim lead was being made 13 to 15 minutes into the game. So it was already pretty decided. I don't think I ever saw the 20 kill lead pre 20 minutes, but it's interesting that it's in there.
Yeah, I think the 20 kill lead is just something that's visible on the top of the screen, whereas the Vim lead, unless I'm just missing it, is sort of a hidden value. It's something that, in the league competitive scene, you can see it when you're spectating, but players in the game don't know what the Vim lead is. So I guess you can kind of see 20, we're up 17 kills, and we get 3 more that we'll force them to surrender or something like that. But it seems kind of just assumed that once you have a 20 kill lead, you're going to have something close to a 15,000 Vim lead instead.
I'm glad surrender's in the game. I think it's definitely a necessary evil in this genre. My biggest gripe about the surrender this go around was that it wasn't crediting you for wins all the time. And I like my little number next to my name, and I like that for that value to be high. And I felt like a lot of the games we played this past beta were surrenders, and we didn't get credit for those wins. And I'm a little hurt over that.
Yeah, it did seem like that was a bug that was coming out of the surrender feature.
It is kind of a funny joke, right? Like, I'm not getting all my cups, but people are starting to really use those cups as sort of you have to be this tall to ride the ride type thing. Kicking people with low cups out of the game. Oh, this guy's got 0 cups. He's, a complete newbie. Get out of my intermediate game. But really, I'm actually 3-0 and I've been winning so hard, but the enemy team surrenders and I get no cups.
Now, just in terms of what's allowing for surrender to happen, do you guys think that the 20-minute mark should be a thing? And we would just leave it exclusively to a kill lead or a Vim lead and just taking the 20-minute mark out of there? Or do you like the 20-minute mark being in?
I liked all the different aspects for surrender now. Like, I think it adds variety. It's almost like, in some games, I've definitely played some league games where it's like, oh, God, we have to wait for 20 minutes for this game to be over. Like, it's been over since minute 11. Like, and we definitely had games like that where you would have that unseen, Vim lead, and you're like, oh, they can surrender because it's, 15,000 or whatever it is. I like the different options. I don't like being just tied down to just a time limit. So many other things come into play.
Yeah, I saw some criticism in the IRC about the 20-minute surrender vote, but I think it really makes sense. The second one, the player being disconnected for 5 minutes, I think that's sort of the Dota style, giving you freedom to leave. And I like that. I like that I can leave my game 6 minutes in if some guy doesn't bother to show up. But there's going to be the players that will show up and then not leave Fountain and will click to make sure they don't get disconnected because, they are either trolling or don't want to get a leaver, vote added to their account. So I think it is important to keep that 20-minute option as sort of like we're losing, it's a 5v4, we haven't hit that 15,000 Vim lead, but let's get the heck out of this game.
I'm so glad about that, just because, and you always get those guys who never want to surrender, and they're like, no, guys, come on, we could do it, we could keep it out. It's like, dude, the beta's only 9 hours long. I don't want to spend the next 45 minutes fighting a losing battle. I'm glad. Let's get out of this and get into a new game, please.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the numbers are tweaked over time and when, say, matchmaking or even ranked matchmaking is added, how these numbers might be tweaked even further.
So moving on from the surrender votes, you'd mentioned the death recap earlier, but I really think the most important addition in the patch is the new voiceovers.
The new voiceovers?
Yeah, so in the new patch you can have access to, I think, 10 or 15 emotes per shaper. Really the only one you need is /flirt, but they've added some other ones there just for fun as well.
I couldn't find a list of all of the emotes, and I was doing that in one of the games. I was spamming all the ones I could think of off the top of my head, and I could only get like 3 of them to work. So I wish they would list that somewhere so I could find out what it was and start spamming people in the middle of killing sprees.
If you were looking for a full list of the emotes, we've got them up in the patch notes on mobachampion.com.
So moving along, we've got the death recap that we've brought up twice now but haven't talked about. How are you guys feeling about that?
Well, I'm glad they added it. It's certainly good to know why you are dying. Because before, it's sort of black box. I've died. Now you know why, right?
Yeah, I mean, death recaps are nice and all, and I look at them sometimes, but I'm usually so angry when I die that I can't process the information, and I'm like, oh, good, a bunch of purple killed me. Terrific.
Right. I did like it. I know there is some dislike for the pie chart, but overall, I think it's good to be able to see, oh, about 75% of this was physical, 25% was magic. I should probably be getting armor because in that team fight, most of that was physical damage. And you can sort of see a quick breakdown of where the damage was coming from, who was giving it to you, and on what abilities as well.
Oh, guys, look at this. This is a first for the podcast. The phone lines are lighting up right now. People have opinions about death recaps. Let's go to the lines. We got Trevor on the line.
Pie charts are the devil, and Dawngate should not be supporting.
Boy, that is some number one insight from our very first caller. I really hope we get a lot more of that in the future, guys. I don't know about you.
That was quite insightful. So pie charts are the devil, John. I don't know what he means.
I think what he's trying to say, in my own words, is that pie charts can be useful. And if you look at the left pie chart, which just shows your physical magical damage split, it's kind of cool to know what killed you. But, I mean, that's sort of only in the specific fight, right? If you get jumped by 2 mages, it's like, oh, I took 90% magical damage, better only build magic resist. But it's not really indicative of the game of the whole. Alternatively, on the second pie chart, it shows all of the shapers that damaged you. When that gets split into 5, and all are about sort of equal, I'm finding that pie chart to be a little less useful. And then if you want to look and drill down further into the abilities that actually cause the damage, you have to mouse over each segment of the pie chart. This little tooltip comes up and it's like, oh, these are the individual skills that hit you. So if you really want to drill down to say, hey, what one skill hit me the hardest, it's really hard to find.
Right. I certainly think it's not the easiest, but it is a consolidated form of information and it does give you a quick overview. I think we'll see improvements to it over time and maybe different ways that the information will be split up and or displayed. So I think it's a good addition for now, and I've certainly been using it and I found it useful.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a great start. And especially if you're in a 5v5 team fight and you see that you took 2/3 physical damage, like, oh, I need a little more armor. But I would definitely like to see it sort of some way of driving it into your stats. So you could be like, oh, hey, I took all this physical damage and I have a whole bunch of health already. Maybe I should build armor. Or, hey, I took all this physical damage and you have lots of armor, but you have no health. Like, something to really drive the player to fix the damage that they're taking.
It'd be great if instead of all these pie charts and graphs and all this stuff, it just says, like, buy armor, idiot.
Right. I mean, League gives you little tips underneath, and I don't think they've been updated since 2009, but I do recall, as a brand new player, reading those and be like, oh, that's why I died. So, I mean, it's a cool start on this death recap, and I think it's definitely got some cool functional uses, and it looks really awesome. I just think they need to, version 2 will probably be the one that I'll fall in love with.
Right, just some better readability overall. But for now, it does get the job done. It might just take a little bit longer, and it's not the best breakdown, but it's not all bad either.
Yeah, let's be honest. I'm just being critical. It looks awesome.
So we saw a new item pop up this patch, definitely. It might have been in the last patch as well, but that item was Strife. And it's an item that stacks when you're killing anything. Workers or jungle minions or even lane creeps, and it gives you both power and health as you charge it.
Right, I'm a little embarrassed because I haven't run the math on it yet, but so what happens is that bonus starts at 4 health and 0.5 power, and this bonus decreases by 1% after each kill. So assumedly that's going to limit off at some certain value, and it's going to end up being... So the item starts at 50 power, it'll probably end up being close to 75, starts at 300 health, it'll probably end up being close to 500 health. Again, I'm just throwing these numbers out of nowhere. But I mean, it's a pretty cool item. It's pretty cheap as well, and seems definitely more farm oriented since you need to actually kill things to level it up. And interestingly, you don't seem to lose your bonuses either, so it's sort of like a permanent upgrade.
Yeah, I picked this item up in the last game we played of the beta because I saw it in one game in the store and I was like, oh, I wonder what that item is, and I couldn't find it, and then I finally found it in the last game. And when I bought it, I bought the second tier item, part of the ingredient first, the might, and I don't think the item was supposed to be in the game because you couldn't upgrade from might. You basically just had to buy Strife straight out. So I kind of got a little too late, so I didn't get too much of the bonus from it. But if you were able to buy that item super early game and like quickly farm a spirit well, you're gonna get a big jump in power, I feel.
Right. I think that's the strongest part about it is that it charges on everything in the game. So if you maybe have somebody who's sort of a health power oriented jungler who's saying, I'm going to rush Strife and then just try and go hurt Spirit Wells and, kill the 18 workers to charge my item, that's a great use for it. And it's really easy to do if you've got an AoE ability or something like that.
That's going to be a big, scary Volok running at you at about 13 minutes, and you're just going to die in 2 hits and go, why?
Right, because it only costs 2,500, which is relatively cheap for I guess it's about average for a legendary item, where most of them are costing, either 2k to 2.2k or maybe, 2.8 to 3k. So it's certainly in the middle price range. So it's something that you can rush effectively first, and it will be giving you stats you need. You don't really need too much pen early, and you don't need too much health early either. So I think it's a good middle ground and something that's going to be worth picking up on junglers.
Definitely an item to keep an eye on, and I think it's definitely going to require maybe some balanced tuning once they finally let it go live.
Right, so I think you guys said that it built out of Might, which is a 1260 gold item. So if this gold stays at 2500, that means the upgrade is going to be only, about a 1200 upgrade, which is actually a lot smaller than some of your big DPS items, especially the ones building out of power, right? Your destructions, your 3300 gold items, or your big mega item. So if you find yourself in a spot of the game where you're going back to the base, you've only got 1200 gold, or Vim rather, it's a cheap upgrade that's going to keep on giving while you're in lane. So I don't know if it's a snowball type item that you're going to get while you're ahead, or maybe a catch-up item that you're going to want to try and farm and stall out. But the low price is definitely intriguing.
Yeah, I like the option for those low price items. Like, it feels good to rush Glory on like Cerulean and have it really early game, and like you can feel confident you have a tier 3 item already. Like, it's just, I don't know, something about being able to get one of those items really early. It just, I don't know, it like helps build confidence in addition to giving you like, pretty decent stats, which I guess is the point.
Yeah, I've actually found myself in a couple games where I was really far behind, and saving up for those premium items is really expensive, because if you're going in lane getting 500-600 gold and dying, you're kind of in a situation where you're going to go, do I want to go buy another power for 375 gold, 400 gold, or do I want to try and save up for that purple item? Meanwhile, the guy that just killed me in lane, he can go back to base with that extra 400 gold or whatever from killing you. So in those games, I tried building a bunch of green items, and from a stat perspective and a math perspective, it's supposed to be good for you, but it feels really crappy when I've got 5 green items and my lane opponent has 2 purples.
It's like stacking Doran rings all over again.
Exactly.
So another feature that was added was lobby skill, and this is a mandatory thing where now when you're making rooms, you're having to say, is this a novice room, a veteran room, a pro room? And I think it's a good way to placehold while we wait for matchmaking to be added, so people can have expectations to the room they're joining, and it's not forcing people to put the word, novice or pro in the title. I think it's good that we're keeping win requirements out and letting sort of the rooms and community decide, because again, some wins aren't counting, and sometimes you're seeing challenger players that are coming and trying out Dawngate, and they're obviously not going to fit in very well in a novice room, but they're not going to have a win requirement to go play in a veteran room.
I think it's going to take a couple weeks for people to realize sort of where the pro, veteran, intermediate, beginner sort of cutoffs lie. Because I was playing in a couple pro games where it was clear that people had no idea what was going on. And we joined an intermediate game for fun, and there was a couple players in there that seemed to be more of their appropriate skill level, but still probably should have been in beginner. And I still saw in that intermediate game people kicking people for not having enough cups. So I think it's going to take a couple more weeks for people to figure out, oh, hey, I'm getting stomped in all these intermediate games. Maybe I'll jump back to beginner. And hopefully people stop with the cups, the cup hate. I've gotten stomped by 0 cup players. I've stomped 20 cup players. Like, it's how many wins you have in a game is no indication of player skill whatsoever.
Oh, don't you love it? We're like 4 weeks into this game and people are already getting elitist.
So, moving into our next section, we're going to be taking a look at the rough beginnings of a competitive scene forming in Dongate right now. Joining us on the call is CSL James. Why don't you take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Now, I'm one of the old League of Legends head administrators for the Collegiate Star League. On top of that, I used to do work with Z33K Gaming as a sponsorship coordinator and whatnot. Currently, I'm working a little bit into the Dota 2 scene of Collegiate Star League, doing a little bit of help there, while also doing a little bit of writing for sites such as Game Skinny.
That's awesome. So you've been organizing all of the latest Dawngate beta tournaments, which I got to play in one last week, and that was quite a bit of fun. And I hear you've got another one coming up for this beta test as well.
Now, I wouldn't go so far as to call them tournaments. In my mind, they're a way for us to gather groups of 5 members, make sure that everybody is, having a lot of fun, and hoping to more of create a fun community rather than a competitive community right now. In the future, I'm hoping to expand outward and, have a more competitive, but at this point, it's really just about having fun.
Right, definitely. It feels like a great way to be able to just grab 5 of your friends, or even looking for more people out in the community, looking for people to play with, and getting 5's pre-made matches together, as well as just allowing more elaborate strategies to be tested. And it allows for more balanced testing of Dawngate, honestly. You can go in as a group of 5 and, only be playing against maybe a group of 2 and everybody else is solo, and that's pretty stomp oriented. But by having these tournaments, we're getting to see things be actually tested, and it's helping to see, who's truly strong and what's weak and maybe what needs to be changed.
Now, that's exactly the premise that we came into when creating this series of tournaments. So the first week of Dawngate, we actually played in the raid call with a few of the guys. We had, I think we had about 10 people inside of raid call. And after, I don't know, about 4 hours of playing against random people in custom games, and normally they were fairly, stomps. They were 18-minute to 19-minute games, very quick. After a little while, we popped down to see how the other group was doing, and we decided to play a game against them. From there, it was a 56-minute game, twice, and then the beta was over. So the second week, we all decided that, hey, this is something that we want to take part in more. So that's about the origins of the set of events.
So you mentioned the first week you had about 10 people playing. How many people were participating in the last tournament?
In the last tournament, we had 15 groups of 5, so about 75 guys. The one before, we had 12 groups, so about 60, and then the one previous to that, we had 5, so about 25.
And are you finding it reasonably easy to manage despite having no spectator mode type features?
We haven't really tried to do any sort of casting. We just allow every single player to cast themselves, as long as they're okay with the potential of stream cheating or whatnot. That's something that we cannot avoid anyway. As for administrating the tournament, it's very simple. We're using Ray Call actually, so whenever somebody has any sort of problem, we'll just pop into the chat. The only problem I've been having is I've actually been competing myself inside of it while administrating it, but that's fairly easy to manage as well.
That sounds like you're kind of relying on a bit of an honor system with the players.
Not so much as an honor system, as both teams come to us saying, hey, we won this game, or, saying the results of their game.
This week you've got another tournament coming up, another beta. Where is that going to be hosted at?
We do. This time around, I'm actually moving on from the Zeek platform. I'm going to move out to Binary Beast. This will allow me to go ahead and have a little bit of extra features and make it easy on me for adding people that aren't really as tech savvy. On top of that, we're going to be expanding outward, and we're going to be teaming up with a few community sites such as Dawn Source, MOBA Champion, and Dawn Realm. Hopefully, by this partnership, we're hoping to get more content out for this scene, the community or the competitive scene, and really just try to foster a better community.
Yeah, covering some of the tournaments is definitely something we haven't had a chance to do yet on MOBA Champion, so it's definitely going to be cool to be able to see what you guys are cooking up.
For sure.
So from the League of Legends scene, I've seen stuff like the Go for LOL tournaments being where a lot of professional teams have got their sort of humble beginnings. Do you think that this type of tournament will continue like that for Dawngate?
Now that's entirely based on what the community turns into. If the numbers do start to improve, we could definitely see that. Right now, as you know, it's such a very, very limited beta. We're kind of capped on the amount of teams that can potentially enter. Now, once there starts getting a little bit more, the professionalism and competition of these games will start to improve. As with once the game starts to stabilize, I know that every week we're seeing some pretty radical changes, and with the addition of new champions or new shapers, sorry, and new features to the map or some sort of a change. So once everything starts to stabilize a little bit, once everybody starts to figure out how exactly they're playing, once more people get involved, I definitely could see something like that happening, yes.
So actual tournament gameplay, we saw some different strategies being tried out. My team, for example, ran a Predator that roamed. We saw Dong 8 win the tournament tri-laning. What do you guys think of these different strategies we're seeing evolve?
The first thing that grabbed me was just the fact that there were so many different strategies. I mean, I've been playing League so long, it's like I'm so used to seeing the same thing over and over again. It was just nice to go into a game and actually be surprised and have to think on your feet and react to what a team was doing rather than just playing a stagnant single thing, both teams doing the same thing and just kind of waiting for the other to make a mistake. Definitely seemed a lot more active and a lot more aggression early game.
Yeah, so I was able to catch the last couple games on stream, watching Dongate play, or Dong 8 play rather. And one thing they were doing extraordinarily well was keeping on top of the parasite, much like you'd see in League of Legends, people rushing the dragon at sort of every respawn after it's been killed the first time. They were doing a really tremendous job of just getting there and getting that gold and that buff, and it seemed to just make their games go so much smoother.
Yeah, in the game that we played them in the final, it was like every second we happened to pass over the middle of the map, it was like, oh, Parasite's gone. Like, we had maintained a pretty good, we stayed on top of Parasite in all of our previous games up to that point, but Dong 8 was definitely on top of their game. They had it timed. They were there every time. All five of them were there. We caught them a couple times doing it, but we didn't have good positioning, and we ended up getting wiped, I'm pretty sure.
Now that's something that's happened to us in the second tournament when the Parasite nerf actually first was put into the game. We actually hadn't have tried the Parasite before those games, so we didn't really know how effective the nerf was. But going into that, like even if we knew that they were getting involved with the Parasite, they were fast at it. Like it was just gone.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a mechanic that rewards a lot of coordination because you can swoop in there and take that objective out super fast. And it's really the only way to prevent it from happening, it seems, with 5 people rushing it really quick, is to keep really good warding and making sure that you're not off doing spirit wells at inopportune times. Then on the other hand, sort of one of the things of League of Legends esports is when people go to do Dragon, you'll see the other team top taking a tower. So with so many other objectives on the map, you could do a quick split to grab 2 spirit wells while they're doing Parasite and sort of offset the cost, or the loss rather.
Again, the strategy with early parasites is quite interesting right now, just due to the fact of how sort of weak. I mean, people somewhat have the mindset of parasite is as strong as it is at level 3 for the entirety of the game. But you saw people like Dong 8 taking advantage of the fact that, hey, let's just get to Parasite at 5 minutes with all of us, and we're going to take it with no issues before people can even get down to contest us. So the fact that you can be taking it at 5 minutes and having that timer then, and just always being there every 5 minutes when it's respawning, I think that's an incredibly strong timing and strategy right now, is grabbing that early Parasite and maintaining that dominance on it. There was some interesting Spirit Well play where we saw people going in and actually like smashing people's workers pre 7.5 minutes for easy early XP, as well as just hurting their Vim gain overall.
That's one thing that happened to me in one of the games earlier. I don't know if it was in the tournament or if it was prior to that, but I definitely noticed the times when I jungled and I was around level 3 or 4 and I happened to just be near the enemy spirit well. I'd go kill like 3 or 4 workers, it felt like, and I would immediately ding 5 and like be halfway to 6. That's something I think needs to be looked at because the workers just give you so much experience early game that if you let the other team take advantage of that, you're going to find yourself at a disadvantage. I mean, one of the main differences with Dawn Gate compared to League is that in League, it's definitely the most beneficial to stay in lane as long as possible and grab as much CS as you can. In Dawn Gate, it almost seems like if you're staying in your lane constantly and passively farming, yeah, maybe you're stacking your Gladiator and maybe you're doing all these other things correctly and not missing CS, but there are other things on the map that are more important. I mean, early game, junglers can come out still higher level than the people in solo or duo lanes. There's parasites to be had, there's spirit wells to be raided. There are just so many other things you can be doing besides passively farming your lane in this game, and I think that's what makes it a lot of fun.
So, if you're, say, a new team with some, reasonably experienced players, do you think there's any, basic go-to strategies you could go to? Sorry. Do you think there's any strategies that you could go to that would sort of simplify the whole process?
I think the most basic strategy right now is just running 2 duo lanes and a jungler. But I don't think that is the most optimal strategy by any stretch. But it's the basic. It's easy to get a handle on. Dong 8, like you said earlier, ran that tri lane, and that really seemed to give a lot of teams trouble. Us especially. I mean, I was continuing with my roaming Cerulean that I fell in love with in the first round of the tournament. But against what Dong 8 brought to the table, it didn't seem nearly as effective. And I think in order to go up against the tri lane, you're either going to have to come up with something else or copy it and see how that works out. Haven't yet had enough time to play it.
Well, we're just about out of time for this segment. Was there anything you wanted to add, James?
Well, if anybody wants to get involved, we're going to be there's going to be a Binary Beast link on the subreddit and in the IRC. So if you frequent those, also if more about me, if you can follow me on Twitter at CSLJames, and I'll be tweeting out the brackets and whatnot as they go live. On top of that, if you're looking for a group to play with, like if you don't have a full group of 5, or maybe you have like 3 guys, before the tournament, about 1 hour before the servers go live, or a few hours after the servers go live, depending on how long the beta is, we actually go ahead and build teams for those that do not have one. But yeah, that's about it for me.
Thanks so much, James. I'll be dropping a link to the tournament signups and bracket down in the description of this YouTube video as well. I think John will try and get something up on MOBA Champion as well. You've got the subreddit to go get links for that. Thanks so much for coming on and talking about tournaments with us. So just in terms of actual gameplay of Dawngate, did you guys get to try out anything cool last beta, or looking forward to trying out something you've theory crafted in the next beta?
Well, I've been really critical of Predator up until this week, and I finally decided to give it like the old college try, and I ran Predator roaming half jungle Cerulean, where we would do this cool trick where I would help the jungler get the haste buff at level 1, I would stand in XP range, we would both ding level 2, and I could run around and start ganking people. And let me say, I really noticed the difference in some of those games, like, whether or not you're getting kills early game or not, even in games where I felt like I was falling behind, once you have that first team fight and like 3 or 4 kills happen, like you really start to see those returns. It's almost like when you buy a Magi as like a 6th item in League and you just wait for those late game team fights where it's like, listen, if you survive, you're going to survive with a lot of stats. So I'm definitely coming around towards Predator and looking to try it out on some different people next week.
Yeah, I think when you have a Predator on your team, you definitely need to make sure your team's going to be in a mode where they're going to want to be looking for fights. And I think with the current state of the nerfed Parasite, going for either forcing early Parasite type engagements is going to be really good for the Predators on your team, because you're either going to walk away with a Parasite buff in the XP and Vim that's going to let you go into a team fight, or they're going to try and force a fight on you. And even if you trade 2 for 3, if you got a couple Predators in your team, it sort of offsets the cost, and hopefully you win the team fight, obviously.
Right. I'm still interested in Predator perhaps getting another buff to it, just something to make it a little different. faster bush movement even being added to it and taken off the adventure loadout. I'm not sure, but it's certainly still pretty strong in terms of gold game. It adds up if you're getting kills quickly, and by the end of the game, it adds up from all of the team fights you had.
And the best part about it is when you get a kill or assist, you get to yell Predator every single time.
Yeah, I mean, you could yell that every single time.
Listen, it helps, trust me.
Should I be shouting Tactician every time I walk up and poke you in lane?
Well, then you're just going to be shouting the entire time.
I got to do some shenanigans with Zeri. Lots of people have been theory crafting Zeri with, I'm going to stick 600 power on her or 600 haste and throw it on this person, and they're going to have 2-second cooldowns. And I've played around with that where I've had Zeri's throw haste, or I've been the Zeri throwing haste and getting Desecrator down to 2-second cooldowns, or Amaranth ults up to 2k power. Especially with Exceed, it was pretty interesting this last patch where you could have Zeri go 6 destructions, get Exceed, Zeri pops Exceed, you pop Exceed, and throw your ult out, and easily one-shot somebody with any ability. You've got people with Fenmore who has like a 3.0 ratio. Obviously it's damage capped, but you can reach that damage cap much earlier than normal, or people like Amaranth and Michaela who can have sort of long-range snipes on people and just doing crazy bursts of damage. So I had a good amount of fun doing that last beta as well.
Yeah, her ultimate is super cool. One of the games we were drawn out to run 30, 45 minutes, we were getting basically somewhere in between a stomp and a close match. We were definitely losing, and it was against a really physical heavy team. So what our series did was started stacking armor, and we had Amoya also stacking health and armor. So when we went in for the engage, we were able to make our front line be really tanky. And that sort of strategy is sort of something that I don't think exists in another MOBA. Maybe Dota has it. They probably do. But it was super cool to see like a reactionary strategy while we were losing of shoving like this odd build of throwing a bunch of armor on Zeri and putting it into our tank and making our tank unkillable. And we were able to come back from a losing game, I think purely from our support players' build choice, which is something you don't usually see.
Yeah, Zeri, I've played like 2 or 3 games with her, but just from what I've seen in the small sample size I have, she's like a Pandora's box of various cheese strats you can do, and it's going to be interesting to see what people come up with in the coming weeks.
So winding down, do you guys have anything you wanted to add, or are you guys ready to just pimp our stuff and get out of here?
Last week we launched the guides on MobaChampion.com, which freed up some resources to make the site pretty for once. So if you hop on there, you might see that we've updated the layout. Everything looks a little nicer. We've got stream widgets, shaver widgets, guide widgets. Added the upvote, downvote system to the guides. So all the guides with the upvotes are the best ones, and all the guides with the downvotes are people being mean. And we also got a couple articles coming in now. We'll have basically like an orange tracker type thing coming out to track the Waystone posts, and we're going to get some tournament coverage coming up soon, in addition to all of the fantastic Shaper spotlights that one of our friends is putting together.
So fantastic. Hopefully we'll see a Varian spotlight this week. I'm working on it. Got a couple things I got to knock out for school first, but then we'll have a Varian spotlight hopefully before Friday for people who haven't gotten to play Varian yet and sort of want to take a look at his abilities.
Right, and currently looking at the site, the stream tracker is empty, but can you guys think of anyone that might be on there next Friday?
Yeah, I will be streaming the beta, as I am every Friday. I will be doing it again this Friday, playing some games with your boys BDNA and maybe John this time. And if we're not doing that, we'll be playing in some tournaments.
Right, we'll have rooms up, and you guys can hop in those or watch some of the tournament gameplay from Twerp's perspective.
The shenanigans level will be high.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the MoneyPigs podcast. We hope you drop by to tune in next week.